This time around, I didn't beg my mother to put me in the same homeroom as Claire Miller. I didn't spend every spare moment tutoring her just so we could get into the same college. And I certainly didn't buy a house near campus with my own money just to make it easier for her to move her disabled grandfather in with us. It was May 1983, and college application deadlines were looming. She'd set her heart on UC Santa Barbara, a school right by the ocean. I applied to Columbia, 1,000 miles away in New York City. In my first life, she was warm and gracious to everyone but me. All she ever gave me was the cold shoulder. So this time, all I wanted was for us to be strangers, to live our own separate lives. But years later, when I was giving a guest lecture at UCSB as a distinguished professor, she was there as a faculty guest, sitting right beside me on the stage. The moment she looked at me, her eyes turned red. "Leo," she whispered, her voice trembling, "why did you give up on me? Leo, what's on your mind? You want to talk?" I snapped back to the present. At the dinner table, my mother placed a piece of broccoli on Claire's plate, her expression gentle. My head was spinning. What was my mom doing here? Then I noticed the details. The chipped ceramic mug on the table, a faded promotional item from the 76th bicentennial. The wall calendar, frozen on May 12th, 1983. This was the day I had begged my mom to pull strings and get me into Claire's class. Had I been reborn? Seeing me zoned out, Mom waved a hand in front of my face. "Daydreaming again? What did you want to talk to me about? What did I said last time?" "Mom, Claire's struggling in calculus. If I'm in her class, I can help her more." And what was the result? I got my wish. We were even assigned seats next to each other. But in her journal, which the teacher read aloud to my mother, she wrote that I was a persistent creep who wouldn't leave her alone. The memory of the fallout made me shudder. I shook my head and shoveled a forkful of mashed potatoes into my mouth. Nothing important. Just thinking I'm in the mood for lasagna tomorrow. The kind with extra cheese. My mother blinked, then a smile spread across her face. "Of course, sweetie. I'll pick up everything we need in the morning." Across the table, Claire set down her fork, her brow furrowed. She was probably trying to figure out what my angle was. Last time, I pulled out all the stops to get close to her, dropping my eraser by her feet on purpose, casually passing her my notes in the hall, even secretly emptying all the trash cans in the classroom when it was her turn for cleanup duty. Thinking back on it now, I was an idiot. "What are you planning now, Leo?" The second I finished eating, Claire cornered me by the sink. She was wearing a faded sundress, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her eyes were wide, like a spooked kitten's. "What are you talking about?" I said, scrubbing a plate without looking up. "You've always said I was annoying, that I was always making up excuses to be around you. So fine, I'll stop." "You?" Claire took a step forward, then hesitated. "What's the catch? Do you think that just because my dad's gone, I'm completely dependent on your family? Let me tell you, Claire." I cut her off, tossing the sponge into the sink. "My dad and your dad were brothers in arms. They saved each other's lives in Vietnam." Saying something like that is a slap in his face. I softened my tone. "And look, I get it now. I was a kid. I thought if I was just nice enough to you, you'd eventually like me back. I see now that you don't. There's no point in forcing it." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The confusion in her eyes spread like spilled ink. I guess it made sense. In our first life, I was like gum on her shoe, impossible to get rid of. This sudden, calm detachment would throw anyone for a loop. I turned and went into my bedroom, glancing back at her just before I closed the door. She was still standing there, twisting the hem of her dress. The light from the street lamp cast shifting shadows across her face. Claire's dad died suddenly. His last wish was for my dad to look after his little girl. My mom, bless her heart, took her in and treated her like her own. But I knew that, deep down, Claire was always on edge. She saw our family's kindness as pity, as charity. If I offered her a piece of candy, she'd stare at it for a full minute, trying to figure out the hidden agenda. In my first life, I'd kill myself trying to prove it wasn't pity. I saved her a seat in the library, stood up to the guys who bullied her, and even spent a whole afternoon at her dad's grave on the anniversary of his death, just so she wouldn't have to be alone. And what did I get for it? I overheard her telling someone, "Leo's only nice to me, so he can look like a saint." On my nightstand, a framed photo from elementary school showed the two of us. She stood beside me, lips pressed into a thin, serious line, while I grinned so wide you could see my molars. Back then, I was so sure I was going to marry her someday. Now, living this life again, those vows felt like a joke. The cicadas outside buzzed louder and louder. Suddenly, a soft knock came from the other side of my door. Claire's voice was muffled. "Leo, come out. Are you still mad about the pen? The one you gave me that I gave to someone else." I already told you. It wasn't on purpose." I leaned against the door, silent, listening as her voice trailed off into a nearly inaudible sigh. The debts of the last life could stay there. She had her path, and it was time I found mine. You can't spend your whole life pouring everything you have into someone who will never love you back. The desk lamp was bright. I picked up a pen and, in a margin of my notebook, wrote a single line. May we each find our own happiness with no more strings attached. The next morning, I was up before my alarm. Usually, I'd be in the kitchen helping Mom, waiting to walk to school with Claire. She'd always complain, "It's so embarrassing being seen with you," but I'd still wait for her at the corner, pretending it was a coincidence. Not today. I grabbed a piece of toast and headed out. The leaves on the old maple tree at the end of the street were a vibrant green, the sunlight dappling the pavement. For a second, I felt a wave of déjà vu. In my first life, at this exact moment, I was pacing under her window, clutching a pack of strawberry Starbursts I'd bought for her. "Leo, you didn't wait for Claire." Gus clapped me on the shoulder as I walked in a homeroom, a half-eaten donut in his mouth. "Hey, Mrs. Davison asked me yesterday if your mom was going to talk to her about switching her class. What happened?" I dropped my backpack on my desk and pulled out a textbook. "Not happening." "What?" Gus almost dropped his donut. "Dude, you were obsessed with being in her class. You said sitting behind her was the perfect strategy for Operation Win Claire's heart. What changed?" I shrugged, flipping open my literature book. "I had a crush on her, wanted to be close. I don't anymore. So what's the point?" Just as I said it, a flash of blue appeared in the doorway. It was Claire, her canvas bag slung over her shoulder, peering into our classroom. She must have heard me because she froze. Her face was blank, but the hand gripping her bag strap tightened until her knuckles went white. I didn't look at her. I just stared down at my book. It used to be that a single glance from her could make my whole day. Now, the air just felt lighter without the weight of her attention. She stood there for a few seconds, then turned and walked away, her ponytail swinging behind her. Gus nudged me. "Dude, look, Claire heard you." She looked totally wrecked. "Did you two really have a falling out?" "Nothing to fall out from. We were never together." I didn't feel like explaining. Just then, our teacher walked in carrying a stack of forms. "All right, everyone, these are your preliminary college interest forms. Take them home, talk them over with your parents, and bring them back next week." As the teacher talked, I stared at the line for UC Santa Barbara. My mind buzzed. In my first life, Claire and I had sat under the big oak tree on the athletic field. She'd used a stick to draw waves in the dirt. "Leo, come with me to California," she'd said. "I hear the beaches there are amazing." My heart had hammered in my chest. "I will," I'd promised. "I'll go with you." We both applied to UCSB. Then she turned around and told her friends I was a pathetic loser for following her there. How pathetic is that? "Hello, Earth to Leo." Gus shoved me, pulling me out of the memory. "You're really not applying to UCSB? Claire told me yesterday she's dead set on going." "Nope, I'm applying to Columbia." I took a pen and drew a thick line under Columbia University. New York is great. Less humid. The day passed in a buzz of excited chatter about the future. The moment the final bell rang, I grabbed my bike and bolted. Just as I left the school gates, I heard someone call my name. "Leo." I turned. Claire was jogging to catch up, a sheen of sweat on her forehead. "What's up?" She caught her breath, her fingers twisting the strap of her bag. Her eyes darted around. Were you mad at me today?" "No." "Then why? Why did you say you don't like me anymore?" Her voice was quiet, as if she were afraid someone might overhear. And the class changed. "I thought you always wanted." "Claire," I interrupted. "What do you really want?" She looked up, startled, her eyes wide. I didn't get what she was thinking, so I figured I might as well lay it all out. "Before, when I was chasing you, you couldn't stand it. Now that I've stopped, you're chasing me down asking why. You always wanted me to leave you alone, right? Well, you got your wish. So why do you suddenly seem so bothered by it?" Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. A slow blush crept up her neck. She'd only ever spoken to me with a cold glare or a tone of annoyance. I'd never seen her so tongue-tied. Finally, she looked down, kicking at a loose pebble on the ground. I didn't. I just think it's weird." "Nothing weird about it. I didn't have time for this. I'm heading home. My mom's waiting for me to help make lasagna." With that, I pushed off on my bike and rode away. In the small mirror on my handlebars, I saw her standing there, a shrinking blue dot in the distance. The wind felt cool on my face. If only I'd been this decisive in my first life, I could have saved myself so much pain. I stopped at the corner store on the way home and bought a pack of Starbursts. I unwrapped an orange one and popped in my mouth. It was sweet, almost cloying. I always used to buy strawberry, her favorite. Today, I just grabbed a random pack. It wasn't so bad. When I got home, Mom was mixing the ricotta filling. "You're back. Go wash your hands. You can help me with the noodles." "Okay," I said, dropping my bag on the couch. Claire's bedroom door was shut. The college form was still on the table, the words Columbia University standing out in bold. Perfect. It was settled. As for Claire, she had her ocean, and I had my city. From now on, we'd walk our own paths. And that was just fine. Once I stopped orbiting Claire, her behavior got stranger and stranger. She used to avoid me like the plague, her eyes filled with impatience. Now, she was always hovering at the edge of my vision, her gaze sticking to me like glue. Gus poked me in the ribs. Leo, the way Claire looks at you now, it's like she's seen a ghost. I knew exactly what was going on, but I couldn't be bothered to engage. We weren't kids anymore. Was I really supposed to go back to offering up my heart just to have it frozen over? The day before we had to turn in our final applications, Claire cornered me at my desk right after the bell. The cuffs of her school jacket were unevenly rolled, and she was twisting the hem, just like she had at my bedroom door. Leo, where are you applying? I stuffed a textbook into my backpack, not looking up. Why do you ask? She paused, as if chewing on the words before swallowing them. Just curious. I zipped my bag shut. Where I applied doesn't have anything to do with you, does it? As the words left my mouth, I saw her flinch. Her eyes, which always held a cool distance, were suddenly clouded over, filled with disappointment. Her lips parted, but all that came out was a soft, "Oh." She turned away, her steps unsteady. It used to be that one kind look from her could make me happy for a week. Now all I felt was relief. A person has to learn to cut their own ropes. The day we turned in our forms, the classroom was a chaotic mess. Claire must have found out my choice from someone, because she ran into our room, her forehead slick with sweat, strands of hair stuck to her face. Her voice was on the verge of tears, her eyes as red as a rabbit's. Leo, you applied to Columbia? The whole class turned to look at us. I frowned. So what if I did? You promised you'd come with me to California to see the ocean. She took a step closer, her voice trembling. Under the oak tree, you promised you'd come with me. A flash of the first life seared through my mind. Her sitting under the tree, drawing waves in the dirt, the sun catching the highlights in her hair. But then I remembered her telling people I was just a pathetic stalker. What did our promises even mean? Claire, I said, my voice calm as I met her gaze. That was before. What about before? You said you liked me, that we'd go to the same school. Why did you change? Because I don't like you anymore. The words are like a knife, and they hurt me to say them, but I knew everything had to be laid bare. I don't like you anymore. You going to UCSB is your choice. Me going to Columbia is my choice. We should have gone our separate ways a long time ago. I had never spoken to her so harshly. She froze, tears streaming down her face, unable to say a word. She had always been so careful to maintain her pride around me, to never show weakness. But now, seeing her cry so helplessly, my heart felt like a stone. Not a single crack of sympathy. Some knots just have to be cut. Dinner that night was silent. Claire kept her head down, picking at her food, her eyes still puffy. My mom put a piece of chicken on her plate, and she whispered, "Thank you, Sarah," her voice hoarse. After she went to her room, Mom put down her fork and sighed. "Are you two fighting?" I pushed my plate away. "We're not fighting." "No." My mom looked at me pointedly. "She's been walking around like a zombie for days. You two used to walk home together. Now you don't even speak. What's going on?" I stared at the faded logo on my bicentennial mug. "Nothing. I just figured things out. I used to chase her, thinking if I was just nice enough, she'd like me back. But she always thought I had some ulterior motive. I'm tired, Mom." Mom was quiet for a moment, then let out a long sigh. "Her dad died young, Leo. She's insecure. She doesn't mean to be hurtful. But you two grew up together. Childhood history doesn't pay the bills." I cut in. "I used to think she was the only one for me. Not anymore. She's going to California. I'm going to New York. I want the distance. I want us to have our own lives." My mom didn't say anything else, but her eyes were full of a sad understanding. "I know how much you cared. If it's not meant to be, I won't push it. I don't want you to have any regrets." "I won't, Mom. The only thing I regret is how stupid I was before. This is better." The cicadas buzzed outside, but the house was still. Mom ladled some soup into my bowl and left it at that. I knew she was hurting. She'd always treated Claire like her own daughter, and had even hoped she'd be her daughter-in-law one day. In my first life, she was the one who pushed us together. But you have to choose your own path. And once you do, there's no turning back. The yellow glow of the street lamp stretched the tree shadows long across the lawn. Looking at the words Columbia University on my application form, my mind had never felt so clear. She had her ocean. I had my city. And this time, that's how it was going to be. From the day I decided to draw a line in the sand with Claire, we became two parallel lines, never to cross again. We weren't in the same class, and I was consumed by studying for the SATs, leaving early and coming home late. My life was a fortress built of textbooks and practice exams. Once, Gus mentioned he saw Claire looking into our classroom from the hallway. I just turned a page, not giving a second thought. My only goal was Columbia. The day the exams were over, I threw a stack of review books onto my bed and collapsed, utterly exhausted. My mother came in with a plate of sliced watermelon. Claire went to visit her grandpa as soon as her tests were done. She didn't say goodbye. "Oh," I said, grabbing a slice. I didn't ask anything else. Her absence felt like a relief, a much-needed break in the tension that had defined our relationship. The days waiting for acceptance letters were agonizingly long. One afternoon, I was coming back from a run when a mailman handed me a thick manila envelope. The moment I tore it open, the word Columbia University in elegant, embossed lettering leaped out at me. A wave of pure joy washed over me. All those years of work had finally paid off. Just then, I heard the squeak of a bicycle at the end of the driveway. I looked up and saw Claire. She was thinner, her skin tanned from the sun, and she was holding a cloth bag. Her eyes fell on the envelope in my hand, catching a glimpse of the crimson-lined acceptance letter inside. Her own eyes immediately turned red. She hesitated, then walked toward me, scuffing the toe of her sneaker on the pavement. Her voice trembled. "Leo, you really got into Columbia." I nodded, folding the letter and tucking it into my pocket. Suddenly, she clutched her bag, her knuckles turning white, as if she were summoning every ounce of courage she possessed. I have something to tell you." The cicadas droned on, tireless in the summer heat. The air was thick and heavy. I waited quietly for her to speak. "Before, I always thought you were so annoying," she began, her head bowed, her voice choked with a sob. "When you tutored me, saved me seats. I just thought you were being pushy. But then you stopped. You stopped paying attention to me, and I realized." She lifted her head abruptly, her eyes swimming with tears. "I realized I don't hate you, Leo. I like you. I didn't understand my own feelings back then. It wasn't until you were really gone that I felt like a part of me was missing." It was the first time she had ever confessed her feelings to me. I had imagined this scene 1,000 times. But now that it was actually happening, I felt strangely calm, as if I were listening to someone else's story. Seeing my silence, she took an urgent step forward. Can you give me another chance? Just one. I promise I'll be good to you all." "Claire," I interrupted, shaking my head gently. "It's too late." "How can it be too late?" Tears streamed down her face. "You used to love me more than anything. You said you'd marry me, that you'd go with me to California. How can you just give up?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her. In my mind, flashes of our first life appeared. Our wedding, our children, and the chilling emptiness of a life with someone who never truly loved me. I saw how she'd been forced into every step, how she refused to even listen to me, and how, after a few years of marriage, she found someone she actually loved. I remembered the smiles and tenderness she gave him, things she never once gave me. I couldn't risk my entire life again on this single, fleeting moment of her regret. I managed a small, sad smile. What's past is past. I turned to go inside, ignoring her sobs. I paused at the door and looked back one last time. "Claire, not everything can go back to the way it was just because one person regrets it or tries to fix it. Just like in my first life, I had laid my heart at her feet, and she had never once valued it. Some mistakes are forever." I pushed open the door. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the acceptance letter on the table. The Columbia University crest seemed to glow. This was the path I had chosen for myself. Even without her, I had to walk it with conviction. Behind me, her quiet weeping and her late-coming affection would eventually fade, just like the sound of the cicadas in the summer wind. I left Claire standing alone in the driveway, her sobs fading behind me. I knew, in that moment, that the fragile thread between us had finally snapped for good. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into preparing for Columbia. While packing, I stumbled upon an old journal. Tucked inside was a slip of paper with a math problem she had once helped me solve. Seeing her familiar handwriting, a wave of old feelings, the crush, the hurt, washed over me. But I quickly pushed it away, placed the note back in the journal, and shoved it deep into a drawer. It was time for a new chapter. The day I left for New York, my mother's eyes were red as she fussed over me, telling me to take care of myself. Claire was there too, standing at a distance, watching me say goodbye to my mom. Her expression was a complicated mix of longing, regret, and helplessness. I gave her a small nod, a final farewell, then turned and boarded the train. At Columbia, the new environment swept me up immediately. My schedule was packed with classes, and the campus was buzzing with clubs and activities. At a meeting for the Literary Society, I met a girl named Chloe. She had a bright, outgoing personality, a smile that revealed two small dimples, and a unique passion for literature. We started spending more and more time together, discussing poetry and novels. One evening, she asked me to go for a walk by the lake on campus. The moonlight shimmered on the water. She suddenly stopped and looked up at me, her eyes soft with an unmistakable affection. "Leo, I've been trying to figure out how I feel about you for a while now. Then yesterday, when you leaned in close to show me that line in the book, I knew. I really like you." She took a breath. Will you be my boyfriend?" I looked into her sincere eyes, my heart doing a little flip. For a strange moment, I thought of Claire, of all that wasted time and heartache. But Chloe, standing right here, was so real and so wonderful. The light reflected in her eyes made me want to believe in love again. After a moment's hesitation, I gently took her hand. "I like you too." In that instant, the moonlight seemed to grow even softer. Life, however, is always full of surprises. When I went home for winter break, I heard that Claire was sick, very sick. "I don't know what's wrong with that girl," my mother sighed. "Ever since you left, she's just had no spirit. Now this. It's just pitiful to see." I frowned. Though my feelings were long gone, we had known each other for years, and my dad had made a promise. The least I could do was check on her. I bought some fruit and went to her house. She was lying in bed, her face pale. When she saw me, her eyes lit up for a second before dimming again. "You came." I put the fruit on her nightstand and nodded. "I heard you were sick. Wanted to see how you were doing." We made small talk for a few minutes, the air thick with awkwardness. As I was about to leave, she spoke up suddenly. "Leo, I don't blame you. I regret how stupid I was." A pang of sadness hit me. I wanted to say something comforting, but I didn't know where to start. In the end, all I could manage was, "Take care of yourself," before quickly leaving. "Back home," Chloe called. Sensing I was in a low mood, she spoke to me with her usual gentle warmth. After we hung up, I stared out at the night sky, my mind a jumble of thoughts. Claire's regret made me sad for what we both went through, but there was no turning back time. We were destined for different paths. Chloe's arrival in my life was like a beam of light, illuminating my new reality. I knew, with absolute certainty, that cherishing the person right in front of me was the best way to honor the future. As time went on, my relationship with Chloe deepened. My studies became all-consuming, and I barely had time to go home. The year I was about to graduate, one of my professors saw my potential and encouraged me to stay on for graduate school. I accepted. After that, life hit fast forward. The next 5 years were a blur. I went from a master's student to a PhD candidate, my spot at the lectern moving from a corner of the classroom to the very center. The stacks of papers on my desk grew taller than my head, and my drawers were filled with throat lozenges Chloe bought for me. After she graduated, she got a job at a publishing house, and we rented an apartment in the faculty housing complex with a small balcony. She filled it with her favorite rose bushes. Life felt sweet and solid, steeped in a quiet happiness. Occasionally, high school friends would pass through New York on business. We'd meet up at some small restaurant, and over beers, someone would inevitably bring up Claire. Heard she went back to our old high school to teach after graduation, Gus said, his words muffled by a mouthful of peanuts. Then she quit and rented a place near UCSB. Moved her grandpa out there with her. Someone else chimed in. She came to the reunion a couple of years ago. Looked nice but quiet. Kept asking about you. If you were doing okay in New York, if you had a girlfriend. I took a long swallow of beer, a cool trail running down my throat. Outside, the autumn leaves of New York were a brilliant, almost blinding gold. A few years ago, hearing this would have sent my mind reeling. Now, it was like listening to a story about someone I used to know. It was all strangely peaceful. Chloe placed a piece of fish on my plate, her fingers brushing against the back of my hand. I smiled at her, and she understood immediately, changing the subject to a new book of poetry her publishing house was releasing. Claire's name was like a faded postage stamp, permanently affixed to the summer of 1983. It was impossible to remove, but it no longer stirred a single ripple inside me. I had my lesson plans, my students, and the sound of Chloe humming as she hung laundry on the balcony. These real, tangible moments had filled all the empty spaces of the past. Then in 1992, beepers started going off all over the city. I was in the bathroom one morning, brushing my teeth, when Chloe ran and holding a small black box. "Leo, your beeper's going off." The department had just issued them. My number had only been active for a few days. I wiped my mouth and leaned over. A string of numbers glowed on the tiny screen, followed by a short, typed message. "How are you?" There was no name. Chloe peered over my shoulder. "Who's that?" I stared at the words. For a split second, my heart gave a strange little thump, then settled back into its steady rhythm. Outside, sparrows hopped along the clothesline. The scent of Chloe's shampoo mingled with the mint of my toothpaste. No idea, I said, tucking the beeper into my pocket and taking the towel she offered. Probably a wrong number. Chloe didn't press it. She went back to the kitchen to heat up some milk. I looked at myself in the mirror. There were a few new, barely noticeable gray hairs at my temples. My eyes looked calmer, more settled than they had in my youth. The girl who had stood before me in the spring of 1983, her eyes red as she asked, "Why did you give up on me?" was now, 9 years later, knocking on the door of my life with an anonymous digital message. But what did it matter? I thought of the bento box Chloe had brought me at the library last week. I thought of ice skating at Rockefeller Center last winter, how she'd laughed so hard she cried when she fell into my arms. I thought of my doctoral dissertation, open on my desk, and the name I had written on the acknowledgments page, Chloe. These small, warm moments were like layers of a cocoon, wrapping my heart up tight and safe. The beeper chirped again. The same message, repeated. I walked out onto the balcony and pinched off a wilting rose. "Leo, the milk's ready," Chloe called from the kitchen. "Coming." I answered. I took the beeper from my pocket and set it down on the balcony railing. The sun warmed the black plastic, and the words on the screen blurred in the bright light. Some questions don't need an answer. Some pasts are better left behind. The ocean in California never felt the imprint of my footsteps, but the snow in New York had already covered every path Chloe and I had walked together. As for the name hidden behind that beeper message, I would let it dissolve into the New York winds of 1992. I had a new sunrise to chase and a new story to write. I never thought Claire's persistence would bring her all the way to New York. I was in Atlanta for a conference when I got the call from a colleague. His voice was laced with gossip. "Leo, that high school friend of yours, Claire Miller? She came by the university yesterday looking for you. Stood outside the admin building all afternoon." I held the phone to my ear, gazing out the hotel window at the city lights. I felt nothing but a flicker of confusion. "Okay, thanks for letting me know. You're not going to call her back," he pressed. She looked pretty worn out. Said she came all the way from California. "I'm out of town," I cut him off. Besides, what could she possibly want from me? After all these years, Claire's name was like a rusty nail. When mentioned, it might poke a little, but couldn't cause any real damage. My life with Chloe was like a set of finely tuned gears, turning smoothly forward, with no room for a foreign object to jam the works. But life rarely sticks to the plan. 2 weeks later, the dean called me into his office and tossed an invitation onto his desk. "UCSB is hosting an academic symposium next month. The university wants you to be the keynote speaker." I stared at the words University of California, Santa Barbara. My heart gave a strange, anxious lurch. I had a bad feeling about this. "Sir, I have a major project deadline coming up. Could someone else possibly?" "You're busy, I get it," the dean interrupted, tapping his finger on the desk. "But you're one of our most distinguished young faculty members. This is about representing Columbia. We can't lose face. Your flight and hotel are already booked." Defeated, I accepted the arrangement. Walking out his office, the sun was so bright it made me wince. I knew what I was afraid of that ocean, of those old ghosts swept away by the wind, and most of all, afraid of a reunion I knew was inevitable. That night, I put the invitation on the dining table. Chloe was arranging flowers in a vase. "UCSB invited me to give a talk," I said. "Next month." Chloe looked up, a red rose hovering in her hand. "To California?" "Yeah." I took a deep breath and laid it all out for her. The application forms from 1983, Claire's tears, the anonymous beeper message, like spreading out an old, yellowed newspaper. "She came to New York looking for me a few weeks ago. I'm worried." Chloe put down her shears and came over, taking my hand. Her fingers were warm, and her eyes held no trace of resentment, only a calm understanding. "Do you want me to go with you?" "If you wouldn't mind," I said, my voice low. "You idiot. I trust you." She smiled and squeezed my hand. "Of course I'll go with you. We can think of it as a research trip to see how a California ocean compares to a New York snowstorm." The day of the lecture, the auditorium at UCSB was packed. I stood at the podium in my suit, and as my eyes scanned the crowd, I saw a familiar figure in the front row. Claire. She was wearing a pale blue dress, her hair pinned up, with light makeup that couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. The name card in front of her read, "Guest Panelist." My stomach dropped. Of course. Halfway through my speech, the moderator invited the panelists to the stage. As Claire walked up, her dress rustling, her shoulders were trembling slightly. The flashbulbs from the press photographers went off like a strobe light, but her eyes were locked on me, her lips quivering as if 30 years of unsaid words were about to burst out. During the Q&A, After a student had asked a question, Claire suddenly grabbed the microphone. Her voice, amplified through the speakers, was thick with suppressed sobs. "Professor Hayes." The entire hall went silent. I tightened my grip on my own microphone. From her seat in the front row, Chloe gave me a subtle, encouraging nod. "Do you remember?" Claire's tears fell, hitting the microphone with a soft thud. "You said you'd come with me to see the ocean. Why did you give up on me?" 30 years of history collapsed in that single moment. A murmur went through the audience. The camera flashes intensified. I looked at her tear-streaked face and all the memories I had deliberately buried. The waves drawn in the dirt, the red ink on the application forms, the cold glow of the beeper screen surfaced with painful clarity. But I wasn't the flustered boy from 3 decades ago. I turned to face her directly and, by extension, to face the pair of calm, steady eyes watching me from the audience. "Ms. Miller," I heard my own voice say, as smooth and steady as a frozen lake in a New York winter. "A very long time ago, I did want to see the ocean with you." Her tears flowed faster. "But I learned something," I continued, my gaze moving past her, locking with Chloe's. She was smiling at me, holding the pen I had given her for our anniversary. "I learned that some people are for watching the ocean with, and some people are for waiting for the snow with. And I have already found the person I want to wait for the snow with in New York." The auditorium was so quiet you could hear the gentle coastal breeze outside. Claire stood frozen, microphone in hand, tears rolling down her cheeks, but she couldn't ask why again. I gave her a final, polite nod and turned back to my lecture. It was as if her sudden, dramatic confession was nothing more than a grain of sand blown in by the sea breeze, something that, over time, a new life would smooth into an irrelevant, painless pearl. Down below, Chloe was scribbling in her notebook with my pen. Every word she wrote was the answer I was giving right now. At the reception dinner that evening, Claire was a no-show. Chloe deflected a few toasts on my behalf, her fingertips resting lightly on the back of my hand the whole time. As we walked out of the banquet hall, the salty, damp air of the Pacific hit us. For a moment, I thought back to that long-ago summer night, clutching my college applications. "Any regrets?" Chloe asked, looking up at me. The streetlights shattered into stars in her eyes. I shook my head and pulled a small seashell from my pocket. I found it on the beach that morning. It had a natural crack down the middle, like a line etched by time onto a heart. I used to think this ocean was my biggest regret. Now I understand that all the wrong turns were just leading me to the view I was meant to see. Chloe smiled and linked her arm through mine. We walked slowly along the coastal road. Behind us, the city lights were winking out one by one. Ahead of us was the dark sky, in the direction of New York. My beeper vibrated in my pocket. It was a message from Gus. Claire quit her job. Said she's moving to Appalachia to teach. I glanced at it and put the beeper away. The sound of the waves grew louder, as if bidding a final farewell on someone's behalf. Chloe stopped walking and pulled a small box from her purse. Inside was a silver tie clip etched with the shape of a maple leaf. "An early anniversary gift," she said, standing on her toes to fix it to my tie. "From now on, you're only allowed to watch New York snow with me." I looked down at the sea breeze in her hair and suddenly thought of Claire, crying all those years ago, asking, "Why did you give up on me?" I didn't understand it then, but I finally did now. Not every wave is worth chasing, and not every vigil requires an answer. The ocean was behind me. The snow was ahead. I squeezed Chloe's hand and we walked on, crushing the moonlight under our feet. As for the faint blue shadow disappearing into the Appalachian Mountains, I hoped she would find her own peace under a different sky, reconciling with her own belated epiphanies. After all, the best ending in this world isn't a reunion. It's when two people, on their own separate paths, finally become whole.